Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm very happy to see so many of you joining our SIG CLI call. And before we jump into our topics and the test grid states, a few announcements. First of all, the next call, which is planned for January 2nd, will be canceled. The reason for that is this is shortly after New Year. So I think that not many of us will be available. I'll send an email later on to Cube SIG CLI so that those people that were not available today will also be aware that this will be canceled in 2 weeks. So we will see each other on January 16th. The next important thing is that KubeCon North America in Seattle happened last week. SIG CLI held 2 sessions over there. I linked both of the session, which is intro done by Sean. He did an amazing job introducing SIG CLI to the participants, whereas Huan and I did a deep dive about the plugins implementation. We also had an impromptu meeting during KubeCon last week, and I'll talk a little bit more in depth in a couple of minutes because we gathered the notes, the thoughts that all of us been discussing, and these are all available in the main topics document. So for now, the test grid, if I remember correctly, Sean was the person responsible for the on-call duties for the past 2 weeks. So Sean, do you have any update on how things went in the past 2 weeks?
Yeah, actually, it was very smooth until yesterday. Yesterday morning, 2 tests, the GKE and the GKE serial, began failing consistently, and I'm still in the process of actually digging into that. But because it's GKE related, I think that it's maybe Google specific. I will get back to you to the rest of the SIG on Slack once I've resolved it.
Okay.
And I'll update the test coverage. Actually, I forgot to do that.
Yeah, from what I've noticed, we are a little bit behind with the test coverage. So I appreciate updating that one because that wasn't updated in over a month. So yeah, thanks.
And I think there may be some changes due to the fact that we have been doing some significant refactoring by removing imports.
Yes.
So and copying code into in order to be able to remove those dependencies, copying some code in that might not have test coverage. So our test coverage may have suffered in that effort.
Yes, it will. At this point in time, there is a quick reminder. If you haven't got a chance to sign up for our on-call duties, which basically means you're looking after the test grid, there is a short introduction. What are the responsibilities? If you're interested, there are January terms that you can sign up. I sign up for the next 2 rounds, which is the current one and the one starting in January 2nd. I'm hoping since it's a Christmas / hopefully not that many stuff will be happening in between. So I should somehow manage that month as the on-call duty. But if you're curious, ping myself or any of the other SIG CLI persons, what are the duties? We will more than happy to help you with onboarding on that role, and feel free to sign up for the next dates.
So one other quick note I forgot to mention is there has been some progress in addressing some of the flakes on the testing with Nikolai. Looks like he may have fixed some of the port forwarding flakes. And there's a PR out to cherry pick back to 112 because as it stands now, or until recently, that's where the SKU tests were failing with the port forwarding. Now that the SKU test should be 114 against 113, it may have already addressed itself. I'll look into that.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so let's jump into the main part. So the impromptu meeting that we had. So somehow we managed to get into a single table. Both Clayton, Brian Grant, myself, Phil, Sean, Juan, Ahmed, Jordan, Solly, and David Eads, and all of us discussed where is the current progress of the platform, the direction that the platform will be going, and most importantly, focusing on where the kubectl or how kubectl fits into the overall picture. The clear direction coming from Brian and from his presentation that he had several times during KubeCon and as well as during the Contributor Summit was that Kubernetes is going into being a platform and providing a lot of extension points. And we should do the same with regards to kubectl. This also falls nicely with the steps that we've been taking so far, which includes moving the printing to the server side, Phil's proposal about moving some commands or hopefully more commands up to the server side, the so-called data-driven commands. We've also covered some areas around testing and improving stability. The plugin mechanism was also shortly discussed, and so forth. So if you're very curious about exact details, what was discussed, and so that you are aware where kubectl or our SIG will be going in the next couple of months or even years from today, it's very good to go through the document. If you have any comments, any suggestions or questions, most importantly, feel free to add them to that document. The entire SIG should have the ability to comment on the document, so we're more than happy to answer the questions. There was a lot of discussion, basically, but we're hoping that the direction that we set up, most importantly by extracting the short-term goal, which is the extracting kubectl to a separate repo, which will allow us to move faster and most importantly in separation from the main Kubernetes releases. That will be the major impact for this SIG to further improve kubectl. Okay, are there any questions as of now with regards to that meeting? Or maybe Sean, Phil, you want to add something, Juan?
I was just going to add, this kind of feels like a kickoff or an inflection point where we're for our long-term planning. So a lot of our planning has been in a medium time frame, and we're hoping to develop plans which are further on the horizon, which was one of the main takeaways from the meeting. At the top, we've put some of the high-level areas, and we were hoping for feedback from the rest of the community. But basically, this is an initial effort to try to have some more and better long-term planning. Does that sound about right, Mache?
Yep, that is correct.
Yeah, and I guess just one thing I'd add to that, when Sean and I were kind of talking about uh, the high level pieces yesterday, the things we're talking about are really about the maturity of the project. Like these are things that are pretty fundamental to any project being successful, like being able to really confidently, being able to make informed decisions about how we add features or deprecate things, being able to be confident in doing releases. So this is really exciting, and I think it's like a new phase in Control's maturity.
Yeah, that's well put, Phil.
So something extra I guess I'd like to add is, so moving forward, I think it would be good to, sort of revisit this document in detail as a SIG if we can, in hopes of coming out with some action items. So first thought that comes to mind is the projects tab on GitHub, which, we've been sort of using as a milestone overview. So maybe we could add to that or come up with something similar as a means of turning this into a list of action items, a slightly more imperative plan.
I think that we will be revisiting this document over the course of several next releases. So whenever we will be planning stuff for the current release, and I'm hoping that this will happen in the next meeting. Hopefully by January 16, we will have the dates for 1.14. I haven't seen anything set in stone yet. So I'm hoping that the January 16 will will provide us with those dates. We'll be able to make some planning decisions for 1.14. As always, we'll also do a retrospective with regards to how well or how badly we did with 1.13. And this document will be always a point into which we will be looking in when planning the next releases as a guiding point sort of thing. Okay. With this being said, I think we can now jump into the second topic, which is actually plugin related, and Ahmed is going to demo the next version of the Crew plugin manager that was demoed sometimes ago, but that was before we rewrote the plugin mechanism. I spoke with Ahmed last week. He managed to update the mechanism so that it matches the current plugin implementation. We still need to move the cap because the cap which wasn't accepted was against the old repo. After the caps moved over to the Kubernetes enhancements repo, we need to reopen that same cap against enhancements repo. But I don't think there will be that many changes. Okay, so Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maciej. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, I'm going to share my screen now.
Well, I think you need to stop sharing your screen first.
One.
There we go. Can you do it now?
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay.
I see your screen.
My screen, right? All right. That's great. Hello, folks. My name is Ahmed. I work at Google. So a while ago, around the summertime, we started looking at an idea around package management for plugins. The primary driver for this was basically discoverability. We realized a lot of people are developing plugins, maybe not so much, to the level that we want, but there are a lot of like plugin development efforts going on in the community, but they're not necessarily organized. So all the plugins are all over the place, and it's pretty much difficult to find what you're looking for. So today, if you're actually, excuse me, shopping for a plugin that is like going to show you logs from the pods, you might be looking at a lot of different places and doing a lot of Googling. So we created the Crew project. This was a summer intern, started as a summer intern project. The intern, Luke Burchard, who's also active in Kubernetes community or as LBV on GitHub, he did most of the work. And then after he left, we did some migration to actually migrate it to the new plugin model introduced in 1.12. So Crew project, I'm going to do a demo here. Crew is a package manager for kubectl plugins. So I'm actually going to go ahead and show the README file real quick. As you can see, we're right now installing ourselves as a plugin. So it's basically kubectl Crew, but it brings a few plugins, a few subcommands with itself to actually discover and install and manage the lifecycle of these plugins. So I'm going to go ahead with the installation. I believe right now I don't have anything installed on my computer about Crew, so I'm going to do the installation real quick. I'm hoping my Wi-Fi is fast enough. All right. So when Crew installs itself, it tells people to add the crew-bin path, which is basically this part, to their path environment variable. So this makes the plugins that Crew installed discoverable by kube control. So once Crew is installed, I can just call it by saying kubectl Crew. And then you're going to see this is the subcommands the Crew binary provides, right? This is very familiar stuff to you if you're dealing with, if you play with the plugin system. So here Crew is running as a standalone binary. So if I do kubectl plugins list, you're going to see that Crew itself is indeed a plugin. So one thing I want to do is I want to run kubectl Crew search. This is supposed to show me all the commands that are, all the plugins that are available. But it basically says that right now you have not downloaded the plugin index. So if you're familiar with, excuse me, apt-get, so this is basically we're doing apt-get update. So a lot of the Crew is basically influenced from Homebrew as well as apt a little bit. So right now, what happened was that when I ran the Crew update command, it actually went to the repo called Crew index. So this is the Crew index repo. This is where we store the plugins. So right now, this is a centralized index, hard-coded in the binary. We intend to change these as soon as possible. When you go to this Crew index repository, you're going to see a directory named plugins. And once you click there, these are all the plugins available. I think this is somewhere close to 20 plugins. So right now, I'm going to look into the manifest file of one of the plugins as an example. So there is a plugin called RBack View. I don't know who actually developed this. Looks like Jason Richard Smith. So the plugin manifest file is the YAML file. This is not recognized by the API server or anything. We just try to stick to the convention. If you go to the spec, the most important field you're going to see here is the platforms field. So the platforms field defines, okay, like what are my installation options on this particular machine? So each platform, so each element in the platforms array here has a selector that is matching to your operating system. So you can basically use complicated operators, like you can say, okay, if the OS is Linux, basically Darwin or Linux, and then you can install like a Unix compatible script, for instance, like a Python script. I believe in this case, this plugin uses Go. So they basically had like a binary built for each operating system. And then, so basically, when I run this command, what's going to happen is that it's going to go and go ahead and download this URL, and then it's going to verify its SHA. This is going to be also the version number of this plugin, and then the plugin itself is a binary called RBack View. And then we define a few operations here. This basically says that when you download this tarball linked above, you're going to find the file listed like this. Please copy this file to this directory. And this is the installation directory of the plugin. So this is basically, imagine this like a staging area. So this files directive basically explains how to extract stuff out of the tarball or the zip file. And another important field is the bin field. This basically defines where your entry point is. So I'm just going to go ahead and install this plugin. So if I do kubectl Crew search again, I'm going to get all these plugins. I'm going to run kubectl Crew install RBack View. This might take a while because it's a Go plugin, I think. So right now I installed the plugin. After a plugin is installed, at the, I think, top here, you can see there's a caveats field. and then we actually print the caveats field right here. So if there's like a post installation instructions, like if you need to install additional OS packages or certain tools or do some configuration, you can put it right here. So this is inspired by what Homebrew does. And after the plugin is installed, I think I can just call it like kubectl plugin list, and this is the native command that I know about, and then I can just call kubectl RBAC view, just like any other kubectl plugin. I think it's trying to do something, so I'm just going to turn that off. So after the plugin is installed, I can actually upgrade it by saying kubectl RBAC view, kubectl crew upgrade. I can upgrade each plugin or all the plugins, and this command, it actually upgrades the crew itself as well. So there's a single upgrade command, and you can limit it to RBAC view as well. So you can say if you want to upgrade just the RBAC view, yeah, it's already on the latest version. And then I can go ahead and delete the plugin as well. For example, if I so one thing to note probably is that you probably noticed that the plugin was actually linked in a directory called crew/bin. So if I actually go ahead and install the plugin again, which will take a little while, I quickly want to show how the crew directory looks like. So inside the crew directory, we have basically 3 main directories. Index is where the index is stored, bin is where the symlinks happen, and the store is where we restore the installed plugin. So if I look into the store with a tree command, you're going to see that this is where the crew itself is installed, and this is where the RBAC view is installed. So basically, by hosting each plugin with its SHA, for example, if I do kubectl crew list, I'm going to get the same SHAs here, mostly because this is how we determine which version of the plugin is installed. And by doing that, we can do safe installation. For example, we can upgrade the plugin halfway, and then if the upgrade fails, or we can roll back to the original version without switching the symlink. So we have like atomic symlink replacement in this case. So this is pretty much what I had to show about crew. Again, we have it kept open since August. This is mostly because we didn't follow through, and we were trying to basically understand crew ourselves, like what are the use cases, how are people going to use plugins, and what kind of plugins will be developed, and how can we accommodate. So if I were to talk about like top 2 missing parts of crew, is right now we don't do anything about OS level package management. So if your plugin needs something like JQ, or I don't know, a command that is not installed, you basically need to tell the users to install it. And the second part is right now we hard code a centralized repository managed by Google. We intend to get rid of that, and then we want to like let people add more repositories from either GitHub or from their, each company basically should be able to like maintain their own private repository and decide what should be installed on each developer's machine. So this is our basically short-term vision for crew, and we would like to see crew as part of kubectl. So this is basically all I have to demo for now.
Great.
Okay.
I
Ahmed,
was going to say, hopefully you have time for questions.
Sure.
exactly.
Great. So I'll start off with one question. So Ahmed, can you, I guess, elaborate on what naming conventions for plugins you wish users of Crew or authors of plugins for Crew to adhere to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So right now in the index repository, since we have a centralized repo where we're accepting these plugins, these are the actual names of the plugins, by the way. So like, for example, when I go into each YAML file, the name that says here is the actual name of the plugin. Like we linked the symlink based on this name specified here. As far as the naming is concerned, we're trying to, I wrote a document in the Crew repository, say it's called the naming guide. This is basically just my opinionated naming guide about like how basically people should structure their plugin names. I think, there's certain topics, like if you're doing prefix stuff, try to do the prefix of the vendor. If you're, doing like something with the verbs and the nouns, try to put the verb first. This is similar to what kubectl does. And I don't know, stuff like don't repeat the cube and whatnot. So a lot of the stuff that I think we will be trying to enforce if we were to have a centralized repo is the name grab. Like we don't want people to come in and put a grab on the coolest names, right? So I don't know how to solve that problem. I don't know how we can basically have, I don't know, like a central repository as well as a neutral guide where people, can't do name grabs. I don't know how to prevent that, honestly. So if we were to host a centralized repo, I think we need to be a little bit decisive and tell people that your plugin is not named correctly. I mean, why don't you consider this name instead? Something like that. But I don't know if that's the right thing to do. And again, if people don't want to be hosted on the index repository, they can still distribute their plugins through their own GitHub repository, because we'll be supporting multiple indexes, right? So, yeah.
Sounds great. And yeah, I guess,
What's your thoughts on
looking,
that?
oh, go ahead. So I was going to say, like the whole naming thing, yes, I think it's great to have a naming sort of policy. I mean, like when I look at, for example, package managers on Linux distributions, it doesn't seem to be that big of a problem for the most part, where someone else took a name I needed for my package. But then again, you also end up with packages that are, say, 3 letters, 4 letters, and they might not even resemble what they do. So I guess if it comes down to a centralized repo, it would be good to enforce maybe some sort of policy that perhaps has people put their either a company name or have a more descriptive name to their plugin rather than just control login or sudo or something like that. That being said, how could users willing to write plugins to host on Crew begin submitting their plugins to Crew?
Yeah. So right now, if you want to get started today, if you have a plugin that works, all you need to do is make its release available, or is it zip or tarball? And we have this document called Developer Guide in the Crew repository. I think it's a pretty thorough guide on how to, how plugins work, as well as like how we write these plugin manifest files, how to test stuff locally. For example, we actually have a command called like crew install -- manifest and -- archive. So this is basically providing those without writing a manifest file. You can actually like provide these things and still, without like actually uploading the manifest file to Crew Index, you can test your plugins locally. So we try to like support local development as well. I would recommend anyone if they want to like, take a stab at porting their Crew plugin to Crew, definitely check out the Developer Guide. I think that's one of the best places to start right now, and make sure, you have a publicly accessible binary download of your plugin, basically. Is a zip file or tarball. Yeah. One area we didn't speak about is the security, I think. Right now, right now, the functions that I've been showing, for example, the RBAC View plugin is basically someone is making this release available on GitHub, and then they send us a pull request. We merge it. They basically say we have a new version, and then we don't go into their source code repository and take a look. So we need to establish some form of either trust with the developers, or something reputation based, or we basically say we take no responsibility whatsoever. Users are on their own if they're installing random stuff on the internet they didn't read source code for. So I don't know how realistic is that, but I think package managers like Homebrew also rely on the same thing.
Yeah, that was the issue I was going to raise was security. Maybe we could get a security review and maybe get SIG Auth to give us some pointers on best practices if we're going to be hosting these binaries that can be downloaded. There may be an implicit guarantee that we don't want to give, but we're giving implicitly by hosting this on on one of our repos. And I just wanted to add that this looks really cool.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, I don't know if we should go into the binary hosting business. I feel like a lot of companies will probably have their own private repos, and maybe for the public stuff, you're right. Maybe we can tell people to upload their stuff to Bintray or something that we trust. But again, I don't know. Since as long as I think we don't go and read the source code of the plugins, I don't think it'll be possible to do. So if I were to go to Crew Index, for example, if I were to look at the pull request that recently got merged, right? So for example, there's a plugin named sudo. When someone sends me a PR like this, all I do is I download the zip file and actually look into what's in there. if it's a bash script, I try to, read it and see what has changed since the last release. So, yeah, I don't know how much of that is scalable. I don't think we're going to find enough bandwidth in this SIG to do that, right?
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about scalability of that solution, and then at the same time taking responsibility for eventual harms that will be that might be caused by this. Honestly, I'm leaning towards a solution where we would, upon providing such a central index, we will say that we are providing the index, but we are not guaranteeing or we are not providing any guarantees with regards to security and stuff like that. We are doing our best effort, but that's not a strong guarantee for any of the users that are blindly using the stuff available in the index. I think we'll have to figure out with either SIG architecture or even with the CNCF how to do it from the legal point of view, because something tells me that we will have some kind of a legal statement under that index. Also worth looking what the legal statements are when it comes to other indexes. Other indexes such as Homebrew or other distros, what they are providing.
Agreed. Yeah, there might be a legal aspect that we don't know about it yet. Yeah. Totally agree.
What's also worth mentioning that we discussed with Ahmed last week during KubeCon is that the next steps for Crew will be to resubmit the new cap for Crew, as I mentioned, against the new repo for caps. And then we've all agreed to move Crew under Kubernetes SIG repo so that it is a official SIG CLI supported project. So that will be happening over the span of the next couple of weeks, maybe months. The index repository will be a separate thing. I guess we will have to sort out the legal part before we will be able to say that yes, we are ready to use Kubernetes SIG repo for that one as well.
Agreed. Yeah, I'll be looking at what is needed from our side. I assume there will be some legal things to go through to transfer the repo to Kubernetes SIG's organization. So I'll go deal with the logistics in the next few weeks, assuming people are going to be around. Yeah, and then after that, we should probably continue the development in the Kubernetes SIG's repo. And yeah, I would like to have more contributions from the SIG as well. So yeah, if you're interested, feel free to ping me on Slack or on Twitter, wherever you want to chat about plugins.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
That looks promising. So the final topic in our agenda is Kustomize. So Kustomize went through the road that Crew is currently following, which basically means that Kustomize started as a SIG sponsored project, and Jingfeng put a lot of effort. She had so many patience for me and other people commenting on the PR, and she finally made it, and she moved Kustomize back to kubectl. Jingfeng, do you want to talk a little bit about the progress, or most importantly, the final state of the PR?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that. Thank you, Margaret. So the PR was merged most likely as it was about 1 week ago. It was merged yesterday. And Phil mentioned several follow-ups that I need to address. So those follow-ups include several different areas. Like we need to check the file count. We need to check the YAML file for group or version count to decide if the file is a customization file instead of using the hard-coded file name. That is one follow-up. The other follow-up is to refine the customized library so that it is easy to call those build functions from kubectl. And so I'm working on those follow-ups. Hopefully we can get a PR out, maybe work in progress PR by the end of this week. And for the status of the customizing kubectl, I think in next release, we will have this available. At the same time, we also need to update the documentations to show the user we have this new support.
Yeah, that's going to be really important. We don't just update the documentation and say, hey, we have some support. We need to really make sure that the documentation we're providing is up to par and not, it feels native, right? And goes into like how it works with the various kubectl commands and what the options are available instead of simply redirecting them to the customized repo or something like that. And that can probably be done through the book that we're developing now, and the current plan being to replace a number of the kubectl documentation pieces with that book, which does a better job of conveying how we want users to use the system.
There's also this important topic that we discussed last week with Phil, is that currently Kustomize does not have an explicit API version like all of the rest of Kubernetes has. So to ensure that we can move forward with Kustomize, maybe adding some new features and stuff like that, an explicit API versioning will be created, where there is already one, but it is not explicitly put in the customized files. We will be requiring that one to happen as well, so that people can easily verify what is the customized version they are currently using and which functionality is available in which versions as we go down the road of improving Kustomize further.
And one piece of infrastructure we're going to need, Mache, is the ability to do or a pattern or guidance for how to support multiple versions of the same file on the client side. Most of that machinery exists in the API server. And so once we need to break versions or go from beta to GA or whatever it is, we're going to do it converting those on side.
Yeah. I think that's an open topic. Let's start with simple. Let's have the support for the one version be explicit. And then as we go further, I think, I don't know what's the current version for Kustomize, if it's, is it beta or something like that?
Current version is V1.
It's V1 already. Okay.
Do we want that to be true for, like we have now an opportunity to do whatever we want, right? Like we can change the name,
exactly,
of the kind, we can change the group, we can change the version. We probably want this to be beta.
Yeah. That was my suggestion. Let's start with beta, since we are bringing this over to kubectl. We'll be actually making it publicly available to literally every single kubectl consumer. So it's worth starting with beta. That will allow us for eventual changes within the scheme if we need to. If we see we're happy, there's no feedback that we need to change it, then we will promote it to GA, and at the same time, we will be able to go through the exercise of how to support multiple versions on the on the CLI that you just mentioned before.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks again, Jingfang, especially for the patience. I know that you've been redoing the PR for at least 3 times, and I was one of the reasons for that. But I'm very happy with the overall outcome and the future of the kubectl with Kustomize in it. Okay, so I think that's basically closing our main topics. So does anyone have any stand-ups that they want to share with? I have one important that came out as a sort of final notice from the meeting from last week. So if you've ever struggled with -- all namespaces flag when working with across the cluster, you'll be happy to hear that I've opened a PR which introduces a shortened flag for that functionality, which is a uppercase A. So that's pretty much all from my end. Does anyone else want to share their stand-ups? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Maciej. I figure I'll just do a quick update on the kubectl independence on removing it from the Kubernetes repo.
Perfect.
We're down to about a dozen remaining imports, and they are the thorny ones. So I think we've made really good progress. We had some good discussions on it on KubeCon. There's basically only about 2 or 3 areas left. One is making progress on the RBAC reconciliation, which is for kubectl auth reconcile command. That dependency is being addressed. The biggest one is going to be printing the human readable.go and the tables that are importing they're importing internal versions of objects, which we have to turn to external versions. But yeah, it feels like we're close. The last few areas are going to be thorny and difficult, so it's hard to actually put a timeline on it right now. But it feels like we're close.
Yep, that is correct. The printing that Sean mentioned, this is the old mechanism of printing resources that we need to keep around for a little bit of while. We've deprecated the mechanism, I think in 112 or 113, but due to the deprecation policy, we need to keep the mechanism around for at least three releases or a year, whichever comes first, whichever is longer. So in our case, that will be actually a year from now, which is 4 releases, to be honest. So that needs literally copying and pasting and making it external, and we'll be freezing that part of functionality. So as soon as we will drop the functionality, we will remove that bit of code entirely from kubectl. Okay, we're top to 50 minutes. So thank you very much. That was a very productive meeting. I wish you happy holidays and see you in the next year. Bye, y'all.